Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Rajkumar. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the second thematic session of this conference on the theme, role of quality assurance, standards and mechanisms in reorganizing the law school. I have great pleasure in welcoming the moderator of this session, Professor Y.S.R. Murthy, a very dear friend, a former colleague of mine here at Jindal Global University, currently serving as a founding Vice-Chancellor of the RV University in Bengaluru. We have a very distinguished set of panelists, beginning with Professor Dr. Hartini Saripan, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Universiti Teknologi, Malaysia. We have Professor Marc De Vos, Dean and Head of the Department of Macquarie Law School, Macquarie University in Australia, which is one of our very partner institutions. We have Professor V.C. Vivekanandan, the Vice-Chancellor of Hidayatullah National Law University in Raipur in India. And of course, my own colleague, Professor Dr. Gaganpreet Singh, Associate Professor and Director of the Office of Academic Planning, Coordination and Interdisciplinarity of Jindal Global University, India. I look forward to the proceedings of the session. I hand over this to Professor Murthy, the moderator of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raj. I want to compliment the Jindal Global Law School, Jindal Global University, for organizing a wonderful global virtual conference. And a warm good afternoon from India to everyone. I wish to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished speakers, as well as participants to the second session on the role of quality assurance standards. The COVID-19 pandemic has completely altered the way we learn, work, live, eat, and socialize. Even prior to COVID-19, legal education faced a number of significant challenges in the face of rapid technological developments, including artificial intelligence, robotics, etc., which the Union Minister for Law and Justice, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, has referred to in his inaugural address. How do we equip a law students with the necessary skills to be ready for the demands of a future workplace? There are, of course, many other challenges. The online education during the current pandemic has added several new challenges. I will briefly outline some of them. Firstly, lack of access to the campus library, print resources, or e-resources. Second, reduced interaction in classes, which in turn triggered lack of interest in studies, reduced attendance, motivation in an otherwise very demanding, rigorous legal education program. Third, lack of support or lack of adequate support to students during the shift to online classes and changes in the assessment patterns. This is especially true for students with mental health issues or those who have a toxic or abusive environment at home or facing financial troubles and who cannot access a good internet network. Fourth, sometimes even professors did not have good internet connectivity with obvious implications for the quality of classes. There were other pedagogical challenges and assessment challenges. Fifth, online or virtual internships cannot be a substitute for the regular ones. The quality of work and the nature of tasks assigned has also changed significantly during this pandemic. The experience of going to courts, working in the office of reputed lawyers, judges is better in person. Lastly, students and faculty exchanges could not be possible, thereby robbing students and faculty of potential learning opportunities. All these challenges raise a number of very pertinent issues. Has learning taken place in the process of online teaching? Was it effective? Has online education improved the graduate outcomes? Quality assurance has therefore acquired a far more importance and significance in the wake of emergency measures that were taken by academic institutions in the past 10 months. The term quality is derived from the Latin term qualitas, meaning the degree of excellence of a thing. Unlike quantity that is easily measurable, quality is difficult to access. Speaking from the Indian perspective, the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, has mandated the establishment of internal quality assurance cells, academic and administrative audits, annual quality assurance report, etc. In normal times, some institutions follow these requirements diligently, while many others pay a lip service and conform to it only on paper without actually taking necessary steps. The future of legal education will significantly change. Online education will not disappear with the arrival of vaccine, but it looks like blended education will be the way to go in the times to come. We need to reimagine legal education and transform the future of law schools. In this effort, quality assurance has a critical role. The session will focus on mapping new areas which should be subjected to quality assurance standards and mechanisms, and determine what standards and mechanisms will ensure effective reorganization and transition of law schools to an online mode of functioning. We have a very distinguished panel from several leading law schools across the world. We will hear from them and also take up questions from the participants at the end. My first question is directed to all four speakers. Given the short-term time for quick transition to online learning, how has the perception of quality of education evolved? What measures and pedagogical innovations have been adopted by your law school to maintain quality of online education? I now welcome Professor Marc De Vos to give his response. Over to you, Professor Marc.
Yes, hello, and you know, I think that the fact that we're doing this conference through this platform is really indicative of the trend that you're highlighting, and I'm not sure how the audience feels about the quality of the experience of the conference. But overall, let me say that here at Macquarie, this shift to the online digital space was not an entirely novel thing. We already had quite a bit of experience in offering online courses and distance learning and blended learning. So in that regard, the shock to our system was perhaps a bit less than in other places. But definitely we experienced some of the transition issues that you've highlighted. What were the key learning points for us? First and foremost, the process was very well coordinated centrally in the entire university. The merging from a physical campus to an online campus, because we went through a lockdown period, was extremely tightly protocoled, communicated. There was a lot of transparency about what could happen and could not happen. So there was a good understanding, a level of understanding and a level of expectation with everybody involved, including staff and students. And I think we all know that clarifying and managing expectations is the beginning of everything, of a good experience. In terms of looking at quality, what we tried to do in the law school was to make sure that we ensured that the contents of the course was sufficiently dynamic and digestive. Dynamic in the sense that just speaking or recording or whatever it was, depending on the ability to go live or not, is not a good format to really capture an audience. So we paid a lot of attention to presenting contents in module form that are crisp and can be digested on a step-by-step basis. A second thing is to try to be, when as much as possible, live and interactive, and manage the student groups around it. So we did a whole replanning of student groups, particularly since our teaching is a combination of classroom teaching and tutorial teaching in smaller groups. We did a whole replanning of the tutorial experience. Also taking advantage of the new technology. I think that was one of the key learning points for us, is that if we became a bit the masters of Zoom, we could use the technology to enhance quality, using the breakout sessions, inviting more than just the normal lecturer into the classroom, into the digital classroom, even flipping the classroom, and even having combined classrooms, co-teaching, and so using it a bit creatively and inserting into the experience of a digital environment dimensions you would not get in the physical environment, because the physical environment would be in a space with an individual. If you go digital, the space becomes flexible. Who is in that space can become flexible as well, because people can just log in from different places. So we try to be attentive, I would say, in streamlining everything. So there was a guaranteed way of doing things, and it was transparent and it was understood. We tried to be novel, creative, interactive with setting up the contents. And we tried to be a bit innovative in using the new digital reality to insert into the teaching experience certain new dimensions. We did that as well with assessment. The traditional assessment were revisited. There was plenty of experimenting and experiencing with online presentations, with online quizzes that were, for instance, module per module. Also a way to engage with the audience. And of course, a focus on take-home exams and digital submission of exams. And we backed that all up, the university backed that all up with quite a bit of support. Support for staff, not all of which had done digital education before. Support of staff in setting up things, providing content, etc. But also support for students, particularly in terms of equipment needs and digital needs. So overall, even though it was a real emergency situation when the COVID-19 hit and the country, and therefore the university sector, had to go into lockdown, it was a real emergency. The whole university mobilized and turned around its model and reinvented its entire pedagogy and way of doing things in teaching in 2 weeks. That was a tremendous mobilization of energy. And overall, we'll probably be able to speak a little bit about that further in the debate. Overall, the experience has turned out to be positive.
Thank you, Professor Marc. Thank you. Now, may I request Dean Saripan to throw light on what measures and pedagogical innovations were adopted by Universiti Teknologi Mara, Malaysia, to ensure quality in the online education. Over to you, Dean Saripan.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Murthy. Greetings from Malaysia. Indeed, I'm very excited and honored to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. First of all, let me begin with giving some demographic backgrounds of my university, Universiti Teknologi Mara. Coming from the largest university in Malaysia with more than 169,000 students and 17,000 staff, we managed to actually weather the storm and made swift transition to online education without compromising the quality assurance standard and putting the best interest of students and lecturers as our top priority. even we, the Faculty of Law, UITM, also we have almost 3,000 law students and 100 law lecturers. Not to mention, we also have our law lecturers in 35 branch campuses, that actually making us the biggest law school in Malaysia. So this is the journey, I think, worth looking into, and it is an experience worth being shared. Ladies and gentlemen, basically we acknowledge the fact that most of the law schools, from the Malaysian perspective, most of the law schools have always had hesitations in navigating online learning until COVID-19 rendered it a necessity. However, basically, in the word of Albert Einstein, in the middle of a difficulty lies opportunity. So the tech-enabled crisis created shift from classroom to online learning occurred with a blink of an eye, astonishing speed, pervasiveness, and seamlessness. So the transition exposed technology potential to support new models for delivering and consuming legal education and training. So distance learning is just the start. And in fact, we commence our fully 100% online learning in April. And we had 2 weeks, for the transition. So against all odds, legal education is reimagined into a more affordable, data advanced, results driven and accountable system. So the new pedagogy infuses the flexibility, agility, and augmented skills and competencies required of legal professionals in the digital age, and that definitely include digital skill. So this will eventually retune legal education from short-term degree program to learning centers for life that provide upskilling and reskilling throughout careers. Said we are very clear on the innovative pedagogy for online learning, I think the most crucial issue for us at that time was to provide high impact learning experiences across modalities. So the question is, how can we place quality above modality of online learning? So the Malaysian Qualifications Agency, that is responsible for quality assurance for higher education for both the public and private sectors, had introduced 5 advisory notes in order to provide guidelines for the alternative delivery and assessment which conform to the quality standard. So these include the adoption of synchronous and asynchronous method, or remote learning and alternative assessments in the form of online tests, projects, reflective papers, and take-home exams, which are tied definitely to the learning outcomes of the respective courses. So the issue of quality has been seriously implemented when our academic office of UITM documented and harmonized our practices in the teaching and learning policy approved by our Senate and the Board of Directors of University. So basically, there are 3 key principles that form the focus of the policy adopted in UITM. Number 1 is the achievement of the desired learning outcomes. Number 2, trustworthiness and autonomy in teaching and learning delivery. And last but not least, flexibility, inclusivity, and equity. So we have clear guidance on how to navigate online learning while upholding the quality assurance standard. And like I mentioned before, we had approximately, I think, 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to have the seamless transition from 100% face-to-face to 100% online learning. So it was, I would say it was very challenging for us, but I think, we have this shared responsibility and amazing commitment by academic staff, students, as well as the top management of the university, that make the whole transition process seamless and enriching experience for us. And I think another spectrum to also discuss and another spectrum that we adopt is the inclusion of emotional intelligence and the human connection into the online learning. And that actually makes things way easier, and we are able to engage with our students because, like I mentioned before, we had 100% face-to-face learning module prior to COVID-19. So we need to make sure that our students could actually follow the learning and achieve the outcomes of the respective courses. And one of the mechanisms is to infuse emotional intelligence and to have human connection into our online learning method. So I think overall it was very I would say humble experience for us, but eventually we managed to go through the challenge, and I think now even the members of the faculties, we are quite comfortable with the online learning pedagogy.
Thank
So
you.
over to you, Prof. Murthy.
Thank you, Dean. If I may now turn to Vice-Chancellor, Professor Vivekanandan, what pedagogical innovations were adopted by Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur, in ensuring quality of online education?
Thank you, Professor Murthy. As you all know that the national law schools, which are established across every state in the country, believes in the Schumacher's principle, small is beautiful. So, in fact, my school has 900 students, and that is the maximum capacity it has. Is at about 30 faculty, which has to be increased to 50 faculty. So one way, the scaling process is quite easy when you have a population which is less. But we faced challenges as soon as it happened is, the students were technologically savvy, but the access to technology was an issue. People are in some remote places because this is a state which is primarily has a very big tribal population. In fact, we have a reservation of up to 40% for the tribal students who are good in many ways, but at the same time, access problem was one of the problems. So in the beginning, when the thing was unfolding, what we did was we allowed the student representatives to come out how they want us to deliver, what are the issues. We thought a bottom-up approach so that they tell us. So they did their own Google forms and surveys and things like that. And they said the problem of internet stability, power issues, many of these things were done by a good substantial amount of students. So on that basis, we had faculty meetings, series of faculty meetings, and finally, we came out with a proposition, which was different from many other law schools in the country. And this is called, which we designate as a model called FTL, which is called Flexi Teaching and Learning. Flexi Teaching and Learning simply means if you have a timetable set and a class is going to happen, the day before the particular class will be uploaded. The day before, night, it will be uploaded. So the next day you have a timetable with you. You can choose whichever class you want to do first, second, or third from the learner's point of view. From the teacher's point of view, in fact, we are in advance in the sense we are not going live because we thought the live has major issues of internet disruption, many things, whereas the students can anyway are going to depend upon uploaded sessions. So that way, that is one point. Most important point which we analyzed was from a teacher's point of view, they have their good cabins to sit and talk everything. Look at the student's point of view. Typically, a student family has 2-3 members. He's in college and maybe his sister is in school and somebody is there and they're living in a family. And where does he have a space to sit and listen to you in your live time? I start my class at 9 to 4 and close. 9 to 4, the student has to compete with a lot of other things within his 2-bedroom flat and he has to listen to you. This is a very crucial factor I found why we should go for a flexi teaching learning method. Then the question came, if it's uploaded, how do they interact? Then we gave the second option, what is called as, another one is called as live in kind of clarifications, etc. So it is called an LIS system, live interaction system. We set a separate timetable, which allows every section to ask. The teacher will put the timetable. You can ask the questions before. The teacher will come live. If you have further questions, you can ask. And this is called a LIS system. The FTL and LIS, which we did for the second, third, fourth, fifth year, because we are a 5-year integrated course. And of course, LLM only started now, and the freshers started recently. So, in fact, November 30th, we are closing our semester. The LIS system, we add intermittent feedback from students, and it looks like they found this methodology is more comfortable because internet sometimes is faster in the later evening days when the traffic is less, and they could access to the lectures, and they can come back to the live interactive session where they can ask doubts and questions. So this is one way of solving what I call a public school, which has quite a lot of people who do not have the kind of technical access, one part. On the pedagogy part, we had series of meetings. I had myself with all the teachers. We are very small, so I could sit with almost all teachers. We had, in a live classroom, you have a PowerPoint, but it is a free flow of thoughts, interaction. But we will be very constrained in this, even we have a live in interaction or this. So we decided how effectively their PPTs, how effectively their audio, how effectively they're going to do. One of the good things of uploading is you can do your own rehearsal and you can perfectly come out with that. And so this, we had 2-3 rounds of practice session with the teachers. I made all teachers to send me a kind of sampling. It is not uniformity. Each teacher has their slight variation in terms of pedagogy. I do believe there should be a diversity. As I believe the next questions will come later, the question of regulation versus autonomy, I do feel each teacher has his own way of doing things, and they connect with students, and that should be maintained. But at the same time, we can have a generic level of do's and don'ts. So we had continuous meetings which happened with faculty, how to phrase this before we launched in August our FTL and live in streaming of question answers, etc. So now all the lectures are available. They can again revisit, which was not possible in a regular lecture room, right? Because regular lecture room, we don't have a camera and record everything. So interestingly, by default, I missed a class in a regular class. In this time, I don't really miss a class because the classes are still there. And as I said, the teachers could even perfect themselves before they go on camera. Of course, it was a little strange, every class to be on camera and then they upload it. But I think, all of them rose up to the occasion. So this is how we did. And in fact, our exams also, we completed the one exams which were cancelled, which is called SACE, or called a special assignment of, critical essay, it's called. It is very problem-based essays. It is almost like an open book, but the questions were really moderated before, and then the students really were allowed to have a creative thinking, how to answer, what to do. So in short, what happens? The pandemic, if I put it in my viewpoint, the pandemic was a paradigm shift. Acceleration, what we are doing so far, was completely taken over by the pandemic. It's a paradigm shift. But as I said, very interesting quote I want to tell. Quite often we have this dilemma, whether all the infrastructure is there, then we move to something. Or is it we move to something and create, accordingly. I only can remember Henry Ford in the early 1900s when he suddenly announced a car for every American, he said. Everybody laughed at him because, the American roads were not tar roads. These are all cobblestone roads with full of horse-drawn carriages. So they laughed and said, with these terrible roads, which even horses cannot, take the car, you are funnily talking about a car for every American. The interesting response Ford gave. He said, when good cars come, good roads come, not the other way, he said. You will never get a good road and put a good car there. Good cars will come automatically. Good people to maintain the cars will demand the municipality for a good road, he said. It's a very interesting, in my opinion. Of course, he's an entrepreneur. He's a great marketing guy to give this. But sometimes I find, and here it is not even we are pushing this, it suddenly we had no choice. I would say down the line 3-4 months, I would say the adaptability, everything has been fantastic. And it has also allowed a serious rethinking of new pedagogy. I'm not going to boast that on that. There's a lot of feedback coming, how it is done. And probably this is the initial part. Of course, all of us do hope that we are going to meet in person. We are going to be in campus. We are going to do that because I always consider, apart from subject and teaching, it is growing up. It is socializing. It is your personality shaping. That's what a campus is all about, more than skills. Because anybody learns equally good in a what I call a distance learning, out of necessity always. But this part of our life, to be in a campus, is, in my opinion, is completely shapes your worldview and your personality and your understanding of society. That is missing definitely. But everybody are hoping and praying sooner or later that we'll all be in campus. But let me tell you, as the other professors before me said, I also held the view. Lawyers have been always hesitant to embrace technology compared to technology student or what I call as medicine students. Probably lawyers are argumentative and they think everything is dialectic and nothing could be done with technology. It's a mere small tool. But I would say now with e-courts happening, everywhere is happening. The entire legal fraternity, I would say, is even may go one step further than normal technology or medical people, because that is the kind I'm getting where everyone. But as I said, the problems of access, internet, some of these issues, spatial issues, all are there. But as far as this online, quote unquote, the phenomena, as I said, it started coming as a kind of a bolt out of the blue, and suddenly I would say that it is now a very friendly neighborhood scheme. That's the kind of thing. That is not to tell that we are going to be online totally. With this,
Thank you.
I will close my remarks.
Thank you, Professor Vivekanandan. If I may ask Professor Gaganpreet as to what innovations were adopted by the Jindal Global Law School in ensuring quality of online education. Over to you, Professor Gaganpreet.
Thank you, Professor Murthy, for the opportunity. Now, coming back to the first part of the question, saying that, how the definition and the perception of quality has evolved, right, during this pandemic. Now, if I consider the pre-COVID period, I mean, the perception among, different stakeholders, including students and parents regarding the quality of education at the law schools, I think it was limited to several factors, which may include, the qualifications of the teaching staff, the student faculty ratio, administration systems, academic factors. However, I think in the post-COVID period, or during the COVID period, apart from the factors I just highlighted or I just cited, there are other additional criteria, that are acting as important yardsticks in determining the quality of education being imparted at law schools, including, ability of the course content to ensure student engagement, ability of the content to ensure student motivation, ability of the course delivery methods to maximize student participations. Now, this has become imperative because in the online education, students are facing several critical challenges such as, learning difficulties, fatigue. I mean, staring at a screen most of the day, brings up a lot of fatigue. Then, they usually tend to give up and, difficulty in, concentrating. So, I mean, overall, I think online education requires a larger sense of self-discipline, right? So coming back to what innovations and measures taken at Jindal, I think the transition was managed at two levels broadly, one at an individual level and one at an organizational level, right? At an individual level, let's say considering the faculties and the administration staff, building up a capacity building, skills, capacities, holding up sessions, people, let's say if somebody is not accustomed to the use of technology in imparting the education, grooming up on those, clearing out their doubts, giving them training on that. So this is more of a one way to look at is that, how transition is being managed at an individual level, giving flexibility to the faculties in in designing the course content, ensuring that, the content would be imparted online. So, and, encouraging more creativity in their course delivery methods. And second is about, transition at an organizational level where, earlier speakers also spoke about, how building upon infrastructure, increasing internet bandwidth and, ensuring handling the power issues. And in Jindal also, there was a unique thing in order to encourage, student engagement. The infrastructure related to, tablets were given to each of the faculties and how they were linked to the technological platforms so that students are able to concentrate better and engage better in the discussions. Further, maximizing on resources. That increasing the resources. So I think when during this, when managing, strengthening both the pillars, both at individual level as well as at an organizational level, basically Jindal level, actually resulted in a lot of positive experience among the students in the virtual classroom. That's my take on that.
Thank you. If I may now turn to Professor Saripan, the discourse on quality assurance standards and mechanisms mostly revolves around the content of courses, lectures, moods, cultural events, etc. However, in the current context, quality is substantially dependent on the administrative support provided to students and faculty members. What mechanisms should be put in place to review and reflect on the administrative support structures in place? Over to you, Dean Saripan.
Thank you so much, Prof. Murthy. Yes, I think, I totally agree with you that one of the main, I would say, components in ensuring the high quality online learning in any law school is to have what we call administrative support. And this administrative support or logistical support is very important. So I totally agree with that statement. In fact, the blending with pedagogical purpose model posits that innovative online and distance learning modalities is not simply about learning content or skill, but also student support socially and emotionally. So this support is even more pressing when courses and programs are conducted fully online. Just like the other speakers, we in Uitm, our students are also having the difficulties in terms of very low bandwidth of the internet connection, or some of them, they don't even have proper learning devices for their teaching and learning, that we manage to gather resources from the synergy of academic members as well as the alumni to come up with the special aids for the students. So basically, comprehending pedagogical content knowledge is essential because it will include the understanding on the significance of technical and administrative aspects of teaching online. So I think one thing for sure, whether big or small, public or private colleges or universities, alike in one way, that they are rich in human talent. So to succeed in this brave new virtual world, the key is to empower and redeploy this talent to address the most pressing needs, and that includes providing technical, logistical, social and emotional support to reskill and upskill our talents. So as highlighted in my first response, combining cognitive intelligence with emotional intelligence, and empathy is one of the major examples of this, will produce incredible breakthrough in online learning, which is of high quality, effective, and we are also talking about accessible here. So the challenge here is getting the next phase of remote learning right in law schools. We have actually done and dusted with the first phase, when we completed the first cycle of online learning. So now we've come to the next phase and we want to make it better. We want to make it right. So on this note, providing the support that I mentioned earlier could improve student learning, engagement, and experience while operating remotely. So there are immediate logistical challenges of ensuring students have basic technology they need to learn remotely. So we offer stipends for internet access and laptop donations. In addition to these technical issues, there are a range of social, emotional, and human needs that need to be addressed to enable students to learn. So some are basic food, housing, and money, and without access to on-campus food services, lower income students are actually struggling just to get through the day. So we are grateful that the alumni have incredibly shown their philanthropic gesture, I would say, in working together with the faculty to find support and additional resources for the students. And mental health services on campuses have been expanding, and the need for them the need for these mental health services to grow for students, faculty, and staff is very pertinent, given the anxiety and distress caused by the pandemic, seeing that there is a pivotal need of emotional intelligence amongst leaders and staff. So basically, the shift to remote learning could have an overwhelming impact on resources. And our priority should be to design specific approaches to suit each need for adaptable learning pedagogy. So different students has different learning ability, and with online learning, this has become a major challenge for us academic staff, lecturers to engage with the students. And in UITM, I think the leaders of the universities have actually done a very great job in providing not only administrative supports, but also pedagogical support in providing trainings to the academic staff. So I would say that shared responsibility between university leaders, staff, students, alumni, even parents and community is the way forward of providing an effective, quality and sustainable ecosystem of distance learning in UITM specifically, and law schools in general. Over to you, Prof. Murthy.
Thank you, Professor Saripan. Now, if I may ask Professor Marc De Vos, what evaluation methods can be used to measure the success and quality of online learning? While students' feedback forms are collected at the end of the term, what other mechanisms could be put in place for a quote-unquote continuous improvement and quality assurance? Over to you, Professor Marc.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that's a very relevant question. Let me say a few things. First of all, the university sector and Macquarie University here is quite sophisticated in an online environment for every single unit that creates a space for online discussion, forum, Q&A, and so on. And so obviously that has been used very intensively. Another thing, we did bespoke and tailored quick surveys for the students, so more tailored towards the type of questions and potential issues that all the colleagues have flagged throughout our session here, to kind of gauge where the students were and how they were experiencing not just the quality of the education, but the overall context in which the education was taking place. And I must say we were extremely positively surprised by that. Obviously, this country, as a developed country, is highly digital, and the young generation are living a big part of their lives online. And we were assuming, we, the generation who teach them, we were assuming that their transition and adaptation to that environment would raise quite a few problems. And actually, we were surprised that there were very few problems indeed, except from some of these internet connection issues and bandwidth issues that we occasionally experience here as well. So that kind of combination of what I said in my previous intervention, of being upfront and creating a clear and transparent narrative, and then a feedback loop that is permanent online for every unit, and then bespoke surveys. And then, of course, we as the staff and the people who in my school are leading, my deputy dean who's in charge of learning and teaching, we in the staff ensure a high frequency feedback and short surveys among staff, where we try to gauge from our perspective how we think the experience is going and what quality assurance we feel is important. So overall, I must say my experience with this has been much more fluid than I anticipated. And the digital skills were mentioned by one of our colleagues. And I think the digital skills really shone through. And I think the adaptation was, and the adjustment to that new reality was mostly a challenge for some of our older staff who were more used to the personal face-to-face. And we are fortunate that we sit in a university that has all kinds of complementary services for students in a very systematic and continuous fashion. And we were able to leverage them. We were able to use and have guidelines and guides and what have you, and good examples and training sessions and all the like up front in that 2-week period where the move from physical to online went. And so all in all, the combination of effort, preparation, communication, feedback, follow-up, feedback on the side of students, feedback on the side of the academics, all in all, we feel that the experience has been mostly rewarding, although stressful at certain stages, but mostly rewarding. And we feel it will definitely inspire innovation in our teaching into the future.
Thank you, Professor Vivekanandan.
Yeah.
Like all other institutions, law schools are also subjected to a ranking system that is dependent on various criteria like the number of research articles, seminars, faculty members, and international collaborations. Quality is thus dependent on sustaining quantity. In the particular or peculiar circumstances created by this pandemic, can these criteria still be applied?
Okay. Let me respond to that. As you said that two questions you're asking. One is generic about the quality and quantity pre-COVID, and then the pressure on that in post-COVID, if I understand your question correctly. So the first part, as I said, there has been, as you are also from Indian landscape, that the point of how do we bring in quality standards has been itself a big public policy debate. If you look at Europe as well as United States, very different. Whether it should be from a top-down model, whether government tells you to do few things, how to do, that is one part of the story, or institutions should have the autonomy. Of course, we have got some very small bandwidth of Institute of Eminence, which Jindal has also got. But this has been a big dilemma. So what happens is many a time when the quality part is from top-down model, it often tends to be ritualistic, right? When you say the number of papers done, number of PhDs done, the quality part has never been the focus for a long time with a top-down model. But things are changing now in many ways. And the word autonomous has been only last few decades, if I remember, even colleges became autonomous in certain level, which means giving certain overall framework and within that autonomous things to do few things. That is how we are going to look at quality versus quantity, because it's not juxtaposed. As I said that we require certain accountability in terms of time, spent and energy spent to put on paper what has been done, but at the same time the quality. The quality part has been always been easy, but the quality part, as I said, quite often my opinion is it differs with different subjects, and as far as law is concerned, that has been lacking across the board, which as educationists you will understand the country vis-a-vis our country, I call the compatriots of technology or science people, they have been always on the forefront, and often law has not come to that level. There could be many reasons. As I said, the focus has been in law on graduate. Even now, slowly they are looking at postgraduate, and research has been always somewhere. Brilliant undergrad lawyers and action takes place in the court has been the landscape. So any law school, whether HNLU or something, cannot escape that kind of ecosystem which has developed so long. But if I put it in pandemic, where you're connected also, what is in pandemic, interestingly, I found more faster work is being done. Could be one reason, as I said, you have a problem of not attending the university. Thereby, you got more time on your hands, vis-a-vis you driving, going, coming, getting ready and doing. Probably people have more time, because I found people are responding faster. Or even I could respond faster reviewing an article or trying to contribute more what otherwise I would have done in a physical setting. This is no way to tell this is a permanent situation. But interestingly, I would say pandemic is, I found across Indian landscape, more webinars on law, more conferences are happening, more articles are coming in one level that has freed the time part. But the quality part is, again, as I said, that the question is, do we need an external level of people who watch all this quality? Of course, you have even Jindal came in the news on scope, how do you put it internationally referred, etc. This has been a long way, but I would say that probably your conference, as well as what's happening with the new education policy coming in the country, many things need to concentrate, not just the classroom. It is beyond classroom, I call it, through journals and articles, etc., which is, in my opinion, is a long way to go. But I would say pandemic has triggered it. That much I can tell you. It has definitely triggered it, but different models have to be put. As I said, that the landscape of education in this country itself, where one size does not fit all. So obviously we need to have different ways.
Now, this it has been going so well, and it has evoked a lot of interesting questions. There are about 11 questions, and there's a shortage of time. I request all the speakers to give a brief responses. Now, Professor Gaganpreet, what criteria do you think will be most important to measure the quality of online teaching, online learning?
I think some of the critical metrics for quality online education could be, maintaining the student motivation in the virtual classroom. I mean, because in-person teaching had a tendency to build social relationships, right? And it was a lot relatively easier to focus on the work. However, in the virtual classrooms, the low level of social contact has caused several problems related to mental health, well-being, quality of life. The other quality metric could be, the quality of interaction. With technology becoming the backbone, the quality of interaction in the virtual classroom will depend on several factors. Hence, to bring quality in the online education, apart from the content of the course, I think several technological, logistical support, that will certainly improve, that will certainly determine the quality of interaction, and that would be a fundamental metric in determining the quality of online education being important. I think other important metrics could be, how do you sustain a student engagement in the virtual classroom? I mean, in a physical setup, small discussions actually increased student engagement to a larger extent. But this is certainly some form of a challenge in relation in the virtual classroom. And I think the last would be, how do you generate positive student experience? How do you further ameliorate the positive student experiences in the virtual classroom? And I think from a faculty's perspective, one important criteria that would determine the quality of their online education would be, how do you manage the virtual classroom? I mean, virtual classroom management, that itself would act as an important pointer to define the quality of online education. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Now, I request Professor Marc, we are taking up a few questions. We need one-liner, 1 minute answers from you. How do you think the law schools would be able to supplement an equivalent quality of exposure akin to clinical legal education, field visits, including court visits during these times?
Oh, look, I think that's impossible. We have to recognize that until there is such a thing as a virtual world parallel to the physical world, and the digital education becomes a high definition virtual reality, I think we have to understand that there are limitations. Of course, you can adjust your clinical work, and you can adjust the way you operate and collaborate with partners in clinics and internships, etc., which is also work that we've done. But some of these things that are dependent on face-to-face and definitely field work simply have to be postponed. And that is the adjustment we've had to make. But I do believe that, there is a world beyond COVID, and it's going to happen, hopefully, if we get access to good vaccines in the not too distant future. But I do believe that we're only at the beginning of what the digital space can do in education. And I think, in the years ahead, we will look back at this period as a turning point, but also as something that, in terms of the digital tools available to us, is very early. We are not in the Stone Age, but we're certainly not yet in the modern times of digital education. So I think the only way forward is going to be about a better way, with more experience potential and more quality. But today we have to recognize there are limitations, and you have to acknowledge them and work with them.
Thank you. This question is addressed to Professor Saripan. How can the law schools endeavor to keep the emotional quotient intact in their teaching pedagogy in a digitalized space?
Thank you so much, Professor Murthy. I think I've been advocating this emotional intelligence and human connection, what we call humanizing the technology, right from the very beginning, of this session, because I do feel that this component is one of the major components to make this work, especially from the Malaysian perspective, where online learning is, I would say, rather new, because we only commenced this year. So one of the important, I would say, modus operandi to have this human connection in place and infused in our online learning is to have an inspiring educator, what we call compassionate educator, at our institutions. And I'm sure it transcends all law schools, that when we have such an inspiring educator and compassionate, passionate, everything would actually work. And based on our experience, back in Uitm, it's very interesting that recently we had this award ceremony, and we have these few recipients of online learning, online and distance learning award, and the winner from my faculty is basically, I'm proud to announce his name, Mr. Sri Rama. And guess what? He is 70 years old. He's not, belong to what we call millennials, or these generations that are very tech savvy. He is 70 years old, but students could actually engage and virtually be in touch with him and really connect with him whenever he teachers in the class. So I thought that inspiring educator is the key word to have emotional connection into the online learning environment.
Thank you, Dean Saripan. Thank you. Now we have just time to squeeze one last question. This is addressed to Professor Vivekanandan. Owing to the sudden shift in the learning pedagogy, how can assessment and evaluation patterns be molded to fulfill quality assurance standards?
Well, as I said that if one can make a creative shift to pedagogy, the same has to apply to assessment and other things. As I said that when things demand, we find creative ways to do that. One of the things I said that I had quite a lot of students who had to write their backlog exams. And one of the things what we did was the SAC model, which we developed, what you call as special assignment of critical essays. So this is a lot of inputs is required. In fact, I will tell you, the response has been tremendous than the regular type of exam, which by and large goes on memory and other things. And especially for lawyers, I think, sometimes I always thought this has to completely change the way we teach and we do exams. Because the exam part is nothing to do with the lawyering capacity, what they do in a court. In the court, they have all the books with them. And they have to situationally come out with something very creative. And maybe sometimes, as Ken Robinson often used to tell, more you get educated, less you become creative. And probably our old methodology of exam, pen and paper, where we put all this actually makes them dull. And then probably they're not at all creative when they really do the lawyering. So probably the creative lawyering has to do with your creative assessment and things like that. In fact, we have introduced academic reforms like they will have we are putting in place, but it's going to take a little time as it roll out with the new batches coming in, is about 5 components of 25 marks, which will include even a short film making if they can do on any subject and tell us. Or it could include, various simulation games, etc. So this is very crucial, as you said, whether COVID or no COVID. That has been a very neglected area, in my opinion. We have been, I think Professor Rajkumar always understands, he used to tell that we have been working things for last 100 years the same way. And probably COVID has shaken that in a way to at least start thinking differently. Sometimes I was jokingly telling Professor Raj should not get, take note of that. I have 100 invitations so far. The theme of all 100 invitations starts with reimagining. So I thought probably we have to come out with a creative name at least to reimagining, because 100 invitations were received on the word reimagining. It's an alternate word is required even in titling somewhere. In fact, we are having tomorrow Constitutional Day thing. I named it as Mess and Scene, which many people ask me, what is mess and scene? It is nothing but a theatrical situation where judiciary media is operating. Probably that made many people even to look at what this conferences or this webinar is about. So I said that as we move to pedagogy different, naturally we have to do only thing. I only worry that post-COVID we don't go back to the old scheme. At least we have a different blended model, which some of you are been advocating, because this is certainly an eye-opener in my opinion, that we will have a new way offline as well as online. And in my opinion, it's a continuous process. As we say that it's not a goal to be reached. It's an evolving and continuous process. And as they say, when things get tough, the tough get going. And in my opinion, academicians should get going on this and do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry that we could not take up all the questions owing to constraints of time. I want to profusely thank all the distinguished speakers for enriching the deliberations. And I also want to thank all the participants. In the end, quality is important. Conscious, continuous improvement in quality is important. And in these pandemic times, we need to be innovative and creative in reformulating these standards. With this, I want to thank also the Dean, Professor Srijit, and the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, for organizing a wonderful conference. Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor
Thank
Srijit.
you, Professor Murthy and Dean Saripan and Vice-Chancellor Vivekanandan, of course, Dean Marc De Vos and Professor Gaganpreet Singh for a fascinating panel. And I think that issues relating to quality assurance will dominate our discussions, not only during, but also beyond COVID. To respond to Professor Vivekanandan's point about reimagining, I think there is, at every point of time in our institutional journey, we need to continuously reimagine and transform. In fact, far too many institutions in India and around the world have stopped reimagining, let alone transforming. So what the COVID-19 crisis has essentially asked us to do is to reimagine and in that process transform as well. So we need to have hundreds of conferences and more to work in the project of reimagining and transforming, as that is the only way by which we can fulfill the goals and aspirations of all the institutions that, and indeed the students and other stakeholders. With those words, I would like to particularly thank all of you for having taken your precious time of your schedule and being part of this conference. Thank you, Professor Murthy, for chairing and moderating this panel.